Hi guys, this is your host Nakasha, mental health consultant. This channel is all about mental health, and on each video I give you guys tips on how you can be intentional in improving your mental health and well-being to achieve the vision you have for your life. So guys, today's video I am very excited about. It's a therapist reacts video for HBO's new show, The Undoing, starring Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant, and Donald Sutherland. So guys, if you haven't seen this show yet, I would highly recommend it. It's very well done. And what else can you expect from Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant? Spoiler alert though, guys, if you haven't seen this show and intend to, or if you're in the process of it, you might want to turn this video off and then come back to it after you finish the series. It's just a 6-episode show. So the reason I'm really excited about this is because it's actually going to introduce our next topic, which is on narcissistic personality disorders. So I'm going to give you guys, synopsis of what happens in the show. So basically, Nicole Kidman's character Grace is a clinical psychologist, and she's married to Hugh Grant's character Jonathan, who is a pediatric oncologist. Basically, he works in children's cancer. And Donald Sutherland is Nicole Kidman's father. So it's established very early on. Nicole Kidman's father is, very affluent, as are her and Jonathan and their family. They've been together for, I think they said 17 years, so nearly 20 years. And they have a 14-year-old son who goes to, private school. At the private school, there's a mom. She's, very beautiful, and it's basically very clear in the show that she is a woman of, her and her family are of limited financial means. So it's kind of, the belief early on is that her son is likely there based on a scholarship. So her name's Elena. So this young, beautiful mom takes an interest in Grace, and Grace is very kind to her. Next thing we know, Elena is dead. She's been murdered. And so throughout the show, they're basically trying to see who could have done it. So initially they think maybe it's Elena's husband. Then very quickly the attention turns to Grace's husband Jonathan. It's briefly implied that maybe Grace herself is the killer, or even her 14-year-old son. Perhaps Elena's had multiple lovers and it's a jealous lover that killed her. But again, guys, spoiler alert, turns out the killer is indeed Grace's husband, Jonathan. So basically, it turns out that Jonathan has a narcissistic personality disorder. Grace has been married to him the entire time and didn't know it. You may be wondering how it is that a narcissist can dupe a psychologist. Yes, a narcissist can absolutely dupe a psychologist. And I'll explain to you guys as we go on throughout the video how and why that can occur. I will mention as well, though, Grace had been practicing for, I think, just a few years prior to meeting Jonathan. Another thing is that we tend to be more objective in situations that we're outside of. It's easier for us to see situations that don't directly involve us, and it's the subjectivity when it involves us that can be almost blinding in a sense. We tend to want to see the best in our most intimate, closest relationships, especially those that have, that have a long history. And for various other factors, like I said, I will discuss as we continue with the video. So something that happens very early on is that you see Grace, this is just in the first episode, very early into the show, you see Grace talking to one of her clients, and she says to her client that perhaps there is a certain type of man she is wanting to be with, and so it's easy for her to see that in the men she dates rather than what's truly there. And what is excellent about the fact they started with this early on in the show is that we actually see that this was in fact happening to Grace herself. So over the course of the investigation and Jonathan's trial, Grace starts to uncover a lot of lies that he told her. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into all of the different lies, but through the course of the investigation and the trial, Grace starts to uncover a lot of things about Jonathan. Now, for those that are not clear on what narcissistic personality disorder is, the DSM-5, which is our diagnostic manual for mental health disorders, that basically lists the criteria for what each mental health disorder is characterized by. It gives 9 different criteria, and someone has to meet at least 5 of them. But the main ones that I want you guys to really pay attention to are that narcissists lack empathy. They also have a sense of grandiosity, and they have a very strong need for admiration from others. Now, these traits have to be stable. It can't be that the person just exhibits it with you. It has to be something that they exhibit over time as well. It can't be that they're exhibiting it dependent on their particular emotion at the time or based on drugs or substances they might be using. It has to be stable traits. So something that is really key, early on is Grace has a conversation with one of the doctors that works with Jonathan. So Grace is thinking, her husband works at this hospital, comes to find out that, in fact, he was terminated. His employment was terminated 3 months ago. And all along, he's been pretending he's still working there, pretending he's going to medical conferences that he's not going to, that don't even exist. But basically, as she's trying to figure out what is going on, she talks to one of the other doctors who makes a very telling statement about Jonathan. He says that Jonathan really thrives on being at the center of intense emotion. And it's interesting because throughout the show, Grace is, really reflecting back on a lot of moments where she saw Jonathan demonstrating what appeared to be compassion for his child clients. And so, the other doctor's making the point that it wasn't even really about the kids, and it wasn't really a sense of, empathy from Jonathan. It was more so Jonathan really enjoyed being adored. And what better way to do that than to be a pediatric oncologist, right? You have suffering parents, sick children, and he gets to be their savior. There's a lot of intense emotion there coming from people all around him, and he gets to play a pivotal role. And that is a big thing with narcissists, right? For example, even when it comes to dating a narcissist, you may, just be enthralled by how much emotion they show towards you and feelings of euphoria and all the wonderful things they do for you. But really, the narcissists are mirroring your emotions. They're really using your emotions as fuel for them. They love that. They love seeing you, feeling all of this love and adoration and, bliss that they created, right? And so it's very telling that this doctor noticed that about Jonathan, whereas at that point, Grace was still very much in disbelief. You also have Grace's father, who says to Grace, like, he's kind of recounting when he first met Jonathan, and he said that he asked Grace whether Jonathan seemed so perfect for her because she had actually told him what perfect for her meant. And he was basically mirroring back to her what she wanted. And this is an excellent statement that came from her father, because absolutely that's something that you'll notice with a narcissist. One of the most dangerous things you can do with a narcissist early on, especially if you're dating them, is tell them all of the traits that you're looking for. The narcissist will happily exemplify those things for you, because for narcissists, it's all about the chase, the pursuit, the conquest. So any information you give them like that especially really gives them that edge, and it's easy for them to play that role for you until they feel that they have you. And so it's interesting that Grace's father had noted that when he first met Jonathan. But something I want to draw your guys' attention to is Grace's father. Now, Grace's father, another reason why I believe that he didn't like Jonathan was because Jonathan was almost a mirror for him. Now, it's not explicitly said in the show, but Grace's father absolutely has some narcissistic traits. Whether or not he meets the criteria for the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, the jury's still out on that, but he absolutely exemplifies narcissistic traits himself. Now, one of the reasons why it could be very easy for someone, even a psychologist, to fall for a narcissist is if one of their parents were narcissists or had very narcissistic traits. in that case, it's easy for them to meet the person and be feeling like, this person feels like home. This person is familiar to me. As human beings, we are creatures of habit and we love the familiar. So anyone that highlights for us things that we experienced growing up, we're more likely to be drawn to, whether it's good or bad, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, whether we even think it's things that we actually want. Even if we think, I don't want these traits, it's very probable that we will end up being drawn to and going towards someone who has those traits. So going back to my statement on yes, and a psychologist can absolutely be duped by a narcissist. If that psychologist had a parent that was narcissistic, they're absolutely more likely to be, find themselves married to or in a very intimate relationship with a narcissist. Now, to explain to you guys a bit more on why I believe that Grace's father had narcissistic traits is for a few different reasons. Okay. Another thing that narcissists tend to have is a sense of entitlement. Okay. They believe they are above the rules. They should be held to a different standard than everyone else, and they crave status. Now, Grace's father, he was donating a significant amount of money to his grandson's private school. And because of that, he had a particular status with the school that he enjoyed. There was a point where the school decided that, perhaps the grandson should be homeschooled because the school would like to distance itself from the media frenzy about this murder, right? Grace's father handles this by going into the school and basically threatening them, okay? He throws it, front and center that he has been donating a lot of money to them. And not only that, but he will destroy them if they even consider having his grandson removed. Another thing that Grace's father reveals to Grace, because Grace had this ideal marriage in her mind that she wanted, and she really used her parents' relationship as the model. She thought that her parents were happily married, very much in love, and she wanted that sort of life that her parents had, okay? This is another thing that can make you a magnet for a narcissist. When you have unrealistic expectations of romantic relationships, perhaps you are a hopeless romantic, perhaps you believe in the fairy tale, you are very susceptible to being a narcissist, magnet because, or not even narcissist magnet, but you can become a very good target for a narcissist because narcissists operate very much in the, unreal. They are very much actors. They are happy to portray roles that aren't real, happy to give you that idealized relationship that you covet so much and that you want so much. So basically, Grace's expectation of marriages were not realistic. Her father actually reveals to her that their marriage wasn't actually what Grace thought it was as a child. He says to her, your mother and I were never happy. I cheated on her repeatedly. And all of those wonderful gifts and jewelry that you saw me giving her was basically to get her to keep me in her life, to stay married to me. And that is another thing that really indicates that Grace's father may be a narcissist himself, right? He, was very unfaithful to his wife and would come back and basically try to buy his way back into her good graces, felt entitled to being with her and being in the relationship. His professions of remorse likely were not genuine for the fact that it did not result in any change of behavior. And so, he's basically saying to Grace that it's very easy for her to believe in things that don't exist. And, for a lot of us, we tend to seek people who are similar to our parents. So for women, seeking men who are similar to their fathers, men seeking women who are similar to their mothers. And it could even be people who are similar to the same sex parents sometimes, right? But basically, whatever traits her father had, Grace likely was looking for those in Jonathan. And, that affluence, coupled with the sense of entitlement and status, is certainly something that her father and Jonathan both had in common. Now, just kind of to explain a bit more about that idea of being beyond the rules, one of the doctors mentions to Grace that Jonathan wasn't even discreet about his relationship with Elena. So I just want to clarify something actually, guys. So Elena and Jonathan were having an affair, okay? He ends up murdering Elena when she takes too much of an interest in Grace and, basically his family. And he is concerned that she's inserting herself and may even expose his affair to his family, okay? And so basically, Elena's son was Jonathan's patient. And in the course of treating Elena's son, he became close to Elena and had an affair with her. Now, it's very clear in the show that he actually pursued Elena pretty intensely, to the point where he was not even discreet. One of the doctors mentions to Grace that they were not even discreet. There were 3 different warnings that Jonathan was given about his behavior, and he just continued to the point where he was ultimately terminated from his position. That's something that's not really uncommon for narcissists. Not that all narcissists are impulsive. That's not what I'm saying. Some can certainly be discreet in certain situations. For example, he was discreet in, hiding the relationship from his wife, but he was certainly not discreet in hiding it from, his colleagues in the hospital. He wasn't even that discreet in hiding it from people at the school, because his son actually saw him at one point with Elena. Granted, they weren't in a romantic embrace or anything at the time, but it was certainly enough to draw his son's attention and for him to realize something's going on here. So Jonathan lacked discretion in the relationship in his pursuit of Elena. So it's not uncommon for a narcissist to lack discretion in their wrongdoing. For one, because they believe they're smarter than everyone else. And also, the sense of entitlement, believing that they're above the rules, believing in their own charm, their ability to charm and sway others, to overlook their wrongdoing. And in truth, a lot of times narcissists are very successful in, swaying us to overlook their wrongdoing, particularly when we are naive to their strategies and, their traits. And similarly to how Grace's father attempted to, he felt like he could sway Grace's mother regardless of how many infidelities he had. Jonathan attempts to do that with Elena's husband, okay? He's murdered this man's wife, okay? And another spoiler, guys, he also has a baby with Elena, okay? So the baby clearly does not look like Elena's husband. The baby looks to have a different race from Elena's husband, but we won't go into that. Anyway, Elena's husband is pretty suspicious that this baby isn't his. And so once Elena dies, he has a paternity test. Of course, sometimes babies may look visibly to be a different race from their parents. That's actually not that uncommon, but it certainly in this case was suspicious given that Elena was having an affair. So basically, Jonathan attempts to try to sway the mind of, Elena's husband in his favor. And so that kind of shows some of the level of arrogance, okay? He's fathered a baby with this woman, okay, murders her, and then attempts to, and also Elena's body was discovered by their son. I think he's in grade 4, maybe he's 9, I can't remember. But after all of that, he still thinks he can barge. He actually tries to barge into their home to sway the mind of Elena's husband. So it just kind of goes back to, again, the level of entitlement, the arrogance that exists within narcissists. You see more of this too with Jonathan, where he even tries to convince Grace that their son, their 14-year-old son, is the one that killed his lover. Okay, so Grace's son had become aware very early on that his father, Jonathan, did in fact kill Elena. In his attempt to protect his father from being convicted, he tries to cover up his father's crime. And when it's discovered that the son has done this, okay, Jonathan uses that as an opportunity to perhaps cast blame on his young son as the killer. So, again, this is not uncommon behavior for narcissists to, when they feel they're being scrutinized or backed into a corner, or, they feel some pressure, to try to basically cast doubt on someone else and, throw the person under the bus, if you will, regardless of how close of a relationship they have with that person. If it's me versus you, it's likely going to be me in the mind of a narcissist. So another thing that's common with narcissists is flipping the script. And I'll give you an example. The detectives basically let Grace know that they caught a photo of her on the street, a block away from the scene of the murder at the time of the murder, okay? And, Grace has been going for a walk, so it was very much coincidental. She didn't know where the young mom lived, okay? Now, Jonathan basically tries to, imply to Grace that perhaps, she's the killer. He basically starts to question her on why she was even there, and even says to her, "Did you follow me?" So he's trying to make it look as though maybe Grace is the killer, knowing full well that he is the killer, okay? Now, this is not uncommon. You may find, so let's say you're dating a narcissist and you catch them, in the middle of wrongdoing, and you question them about it. It's not uncommon for the narcissist to try to turn the tables and say to you that it's actually you, okay? One term for it is gaslighting. They may make it seem as though you've imagined the entire thing. They'll even accuse you of being crazy, or they'll say that you're the guilty party, right? Perhaps you find your narcissistic spouse being unfaithful. They may turn the tables and imply that you are the one that's been unfaithful, or say that you've imagined the whole thing. With narcissists, it's all about winning. It's interesting because, Grace's father actually hires for Jonathan a very expensive attorney, one that's known to be one of the best in their field. And throughout the whole show, you can see clearly that Grace's father knows that Jonathan is the killer. At no point does he feel any doubt. Yet he still hires the best attorney that money can buy for Jonathan. And again, that's not uncommon of narcissists, right? Or those with narcissistic traits, wanting to surround yourself with the people who have the highest status, people who appear special in some way, because, having that association with them just kind of highlights or heightens your own persona of being someone of high status and someone that's uniquely special in some way. And so basically, just to kind of go back to the point I was trying to make, though, is that Jonathan blames his attorney at the end of the trial when it's looking like he's not going to win. So his lawyer actually went above and beyond, and in representing him, she actually did a very excellent job. Certainly decided to forego a lot of ethics, or we can say morality, if you will, in her defense of Jonathan, and yet Jonathan attempts to blame her for the potential loss. And it's very clear that the potential loss is actually due to his own wrongdoing in multiple ways, even beyond the fact that he killed someone to begin with. And again, it's not uncommon for a narcissist to try to cast blame on others when the consequences of their own actions come back on them. So one of the things that Grace learns over the course of Jonathan's trial is that Jonathan had a 4-year-old sister when he was 14 who died, and Jonathan contributed to her death. So basically, he was responsible for, looking out for his sister. He didn't, and his sister ended up dying. And so Grace is speaking to Jonathan's mother, and she basically tells Grace that after the 4-year-old sister, Katie, died, they surrounded Jonathan with family, and they thought that once the shock wore off, that he would feel guilt and grief, and that it just never came. Jonathan didn't experience any guilt or grief, any trauma from Katie's death. He didn't have any sense of responsibility for his part in it, no feeling of wrongdoing at all. And she said that not only did Jonathan feel no guilt or remorse, or grief, but he actually didn't even talk about it again after that happened. He just continued on with life as normal, like it didn't even happen. So basically, she was identifying her own son as, being a sociopath, in his inability to feel any sort of guilt, empathy, or remorse. Another clue we get about the lack of remorse that exists within Jonathan is that after he killed Elena, so immediately afterwards, he got into bed with his wife Grace and made love to her. So as far as we know, this is his first murder. So he's just taken the life of his lover, who he claims later in the show to have madly loved. So after he's just taken her life in a very, very brutal way, to say the least, he just climbs into bed and makes love to his wife as if nothing happened. Another really great statement that's made is at the conclusion of Jonathan's trial, the prosecutor is questioning Grace on the stand, and she says to Grace, in your practice, do you not sometimes tell your clients that at times they may choose to unknow things or unsee things, in their desperation to believe that their spouse is who they want them to be? So that's, that fixation on seeing their spouse in a particular way actually causes them to be blind to what and who their spouse truly is. And that was a really, really great statement in the conclusion of the trial, because it really highlights what was happening with Grace. She was very discerning when it came to, others around her, with her clients being a very successful psychologist, but with her own husband, she just wasn't able to see it. And this is something that's very, very common with all of us. So another reason that a narcissist, would pursue a psychologist, for example, in this case, is Grace was not only a psychologist, but she was a very expensive one, right? She was someone who was very esteemed in her field. And so narcissists really will pursue the person who either appears more attractive than the norm, more intelligent, talented in a lot of areas, has a great reputation, or even, someone who is unique in some way to others. Narcissists, because of the inflated sense of self, the sense of grandiosity, they really do want someone who makes them look good. Okay, they're not typically going to go to someone who's an easy catch. They're going to go to someone who's a bit more hard to get, someone that's a bit more selective, someone who other people want. To pursue someone like Grace makes Jonathan look very good. Another thing that narcissists tend to be attracted to is people who work in the helping fields. And what is a psychologist but someone who works in the helping field? So when you're in the helping field, for the most part, not all, you'll certainly see people who are in helping fields who are narcissists themselves, as was the case with Jonathan. But for the most part, people who are drawn to the helping fields are people who have a high degree of empathy, okay? When you have a high degree of empathy, certainly this is a strength, but it can certainly also make you a perfect target for a narcissist, because you're very willing to overlook the wrongdoing of others. You make excuses for their behavior. Especially working in mental health, we tend to see others from a very trauma informed perspective, right? So when someone behaves badly, we are aware that it can be due to a multitude of things. So certainly we're more tolerant because of that sense of compassion, right? So having those characteristics does make you someone who is more willing to overlook a lot of things that narcissists do. It also makes you more forgiving. And so, that is someone that makes a very good mate for our narcissist. So Grace being in the helping field, particularly as a psychologist, having that status and esteem as a result of not only being from an affluent family, but also from her career, that does explain why Jonathan was attracted to her, and also why she was able to be with Jonathan without seeing him for what he really is. To speak more to the fact that narcissists prefer someone who is more determined, strong-willed, stubborn, they prefer that to someone who is very, flexible and, easily manipulated, because again, it's a greater conquest for them if they can kind of break down the person who seems more psychologically strong or more emotionally strong or more emotionally invulnerable, right? So there's a scene where this is after Jonathan has been named as the primary suspect in Elena's murder. And lies start to become unraveled. Grace says to Jonathan, you know me, I'm going to choose my mind over my heart. And how does Jonathan respond? He starts to say, oh, come here. And he starts to hold her close, right? That is a classic response from a narcissist in the face of potential rejection. For them at that point, it becomes an even more worthwhile pursuit, that he's going to show Grace that despite, her saying, I'm going to choose my mind over my heart, despite her, refusing him, he is going to win her over. Yes, he is that charming. That's basically what he's showing even in that scene. So Grace, who says, again, I choose my mind over my heart, even in that moment, she just gives into his arms, despite her protesting otherwise. She does pull away, but then of course goes back again. And you'll just kind of see how that whole dynamic plays out in the show. One of the things that make narcissists very successful is when we have a lack of boundaries, okay? Narcissists are very good hunters, okay? Their social IQ is very high, and so when you try to break up with them, they will pursue and pursue and pursue. It is not uncommon for a narcissist to pursue you for years for a romantic relationship. It's not uncommon at all. And when they do that, it's very easy for us to believe, wow, this person really loves me. Wow, they must view me as really special if they're not giving up. Wow, as much as I shut them down, as rude as I may even be to them, they still keep trying. But the unfortunate truth, okay, and which is also the fact of the matter, is that then it's not about you. It has more to do with the narcissist's ego than it has anything to do with you. Narcissists love the hunt. They love the chase. If they can wear you down, then absolutely it's going to be a boost to their ego. It's a source of narcissistic fuel that they can win you back. And so you're going to see Jonathan doing that with Grace. Even though the truth about him is being uncovered, he is still pursuing her very intensely. So to go back to the lack of boundaries, that's one of the things that's very important to be mindful of early on in a relationship with narcissists. They actually start trying to violate your boundaries early on, okay? And I mean boundaries that you have clearly communicated, okay? The more boundaries they can get you to violate for them, the better. And that's also part of how they get their grip on you. If someone can get you to violate their boundaries, your boundaries repeatedly, and you continue to stay with them, it entangles you with them emotionally even more so. So if you see someone early on trying to violate your boundaries after you've clearly communicated them. Now, I'm not saying boundaries that you haven't communicated, because someone can easily get you to violate boundaries if they don't even know the boundaries exist. So if you've clearly communicated your boundaries and the person continues to try to get you to break them, to be flexible about it, to violate them, that is a very huge red flag. Now, it doesn't mean the person is a narcissist, right? But it does mean that this is not going to be a healthy relationship. And that, coupled with a lot of other things, can be a cue that potentially you are dealing with a narcissist. So when things are no longer going Jonathan's way, and it becomes clear that his wife has become wise to, who he truly is, and, he realizes that she's actually betrayed him, he then decides that he is going to hurt her. For narcissists, it's all about the win. And in that moment, their son became the weapon for him in trying to win over his wife. So he basically tries to not only take his life, but take the life of his son. His son is begging and is pleading, and Jonathan isn't even fazed. However, now when Grace enters the scene and he hears Grace calling his name, suddenly he changes his mind about ending his life. And he says, "Oh, Grace, come here, come here." And he's, expecting this reunion again of Grace just falling into his arms. And then when he sees that that's not the case, Grace is actually more so concerned about the well-being of her son, he gets angry again and starts calling after his son's name. Now, when you see the show, you'll know exactly which scenes I'm referring to, but basically, it doesn't matter who is a casualty for Jonathan if it means winning. Okay, that's his sole focus, and he only decides to, potentially relent when it looks like Grace might be concerned about his well-being or ready to take him back. So, yeah, when you are, emotionally entangled with a narcissist, the cost to you can be quite high. If the narcissist is exposed in the relationship and, when the relationship is coming to an end, pretty much at that point, it's like all bets are off. Now, going back to the pursuit, Elena, again, she's this young, beautiful mom, and it was made very clear in the show that Jonathan really pursued her. And it seems like he really, really wanted her, even if at the cost of his career. Now, what happened was the inevitable. He wanted Elena till he got her, and then when she started to show some psychological vulnerability, what he perceived as some emotional weakness, he started to tire of her. And when he became tired of her and felt that she was threatening this life that he had built for himself, he decided to get rid of her. And, he had also painted this picture of Elena as being, unstable, crazy, obsessive. And again, this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for a narcissist to try to then start to make you look crazy, obsessive, paranoid, either when they're done with you or if they feel like you're exposing their facade, their persona to others. It's very easy for them to make you look like you're the one that's psychologically unstable. And we certainly see this in the dynamic between Jonathan and Elena's relationship. And that's something that's important to remember. The same way that Jonathan became just tired of Elena, when a narcissist has chosen the object of their affection, they can make you feel like you are the most special person in the world. They can make you feel like you're the only man or woman in the world. They put you up on this pedestal. And just as easy as they put you on the pedestal, they can easily take you down. The person that that has been the object of their affection and attention can, go through a psychological shock about it. This confusion of how can this person suddenly changed their mind about me so drastically, and then you start to fight to find a way back into their good graces, and you're hanging on to this hope that they could feel this way about you again, they can view you in this way and love you in this way, and you get yourself into this vicious cycle of trying to gain their approval that you will not get again. And this again is narcissistic fuel for them. They enjoy this. This is amusing. Seeing you being there, just vying for their attention, trying to get back that place you once held in their heart, appearingly, just trying to get that back, trying to get back what you believed you guys had, trying to get back what you believed as potential in the relationship. So basically it's a psychological game that they play with you, and every now and then they might give you little bits of that again to make you feel like possibly you could be that person for them again, only to take it away. And you'll certainly see that with Jonathan and Elena. She desperately tries to get back that place that she had with him. She even says things to him like, you'll never leave me, you'll never hurt me, because she's desperately trying to hang on to who he pretended to be to her earlier, rather than seeing who he is revealing himself to be now. So basically the plot of the show is, to be clear, is Jonathan is married to Grace. He begins an affair with Elena, who is another mom at the private school that their son attends. Turns out that Elena's son is not at the private school due to a scholarship, but rather because Jonathan funded, him to attend the school. So Jonathan was also the doctor of Elena's son, because his son developed cancer. And so in the course of treating their son, he ends up having an affair with Elena. He then feels like Elena is threatening his marriage and, could potentially reveal their affair. So he murders her to get rid of her. Before murdering her, though, he fathers another baby with Elena. Elena's body is discovered by her son. And then, the murder is reported by Elena's husband. So basically in the show, you're going to see the investigation, and then it concludes with the trial. Okay guys, so I hope you enjoyed today's Therapist React video. If you liked it, let me know by hitting the thumbs up icon, and also share this video with anyone else you know that might enjoy it, especially anyone you know who's watched the show. Again, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. If you want to see more Therapist React videos, please let me know in the comment section. If there are also particular shows you'd like me to do a React video on with a mental health theme, please note those below as well, and I'll be happy to do so. You may actually find a Therapist React video on your recommendation. If you guys have any questions, post those in the comments as well. But yeah, guys, thanks for joining me today, and I will look forward to catching you at the next video.